Your phone rings and you find out that one of your farm workers has just been hit with his vehicle crossing a train track. One of the worst calls a farmer could get. Stars has been called out. You're, of course, concerned for the person's safety. And then you start thinking about the liability exposure of the farming operation. Hi, I'm Rob Saik, and welcome back to another AGvisor podcast. Today, we're featuring the second in a series with Dave Nussbaumer of Lakeview Insurance. Dave, this situation is real, and it happens, and it sends a chill through the bloodlines of a farming operation. Let's begin with that.
Yeah, sad but true. A lot of activity and a lot of vehicles moving around and implements and train collisions are very common in the farming community. Uh, some are minor and some aren't, unfortunately. So yes, I mean, the first thing you worry about is the health and safety of your employee and the operators of the train. But then reality sets in, and you worry about your farming operation and your business. So that's where insurance comes into play.
Well, farms are busy, dynamic places. Accidents can happen. What happens if somebody gets hurt or even killed on your farm? And how exposed are you as a farm operator? We're going to dig into this today. Lakeview Insurance is part of AGvisor Pro. AGvisor Pro is a app that you can download on your phone that is connecting farmers and ranchers to experts and companies like Lakeview Insurance. So that's what we're trying to do, is to connect farmers with experts like Dave that are going to help dig in to some of these issues. So when you, Dave, look at a farming operation today, how generally, and I know this is a terrible question, but generally, how exposed are some of the farming operations you're looking at?
You know, we live in a litigious world. Social media, of course, brings everything to the forefront immediately. Um, so they are exposed. We live in a world that no matter how good or friendly you are with the your employees or you're related to them, the exposure's there. When someone gets hurt or heaven forbid killed, um, liability becomes a situation and litigation. So, all you can do as a business owner, a farm operator, is try to carry proper limits and make sure that you're covering your exposures. If you live in areas that are surrounded by railway tracks, as the example was at the beginning, but it doesn't even have to be that. It could be by a highway.
Mhm.
You're pulling out onto a highway with a 45-foot header and you don't happen to unhook it. You feel that you can maybe sneak it down a secondary highway. There's an exposure there. So there's so many situations, and all our job is to come to your farm, which we do, and we discuss the exposures and the easy things. The big things are easy to identify. It's the uh, it's the secondary and the little things you don't realize um, on your farm, especially if you live in a world where you just get your farm policy mailed to you and you aren't doing consultations in person. And maybe your broker might be the best person in the world, but they're not familiar with all the farm risks and exposures. You do a little random custom combining for your neighbor and you don't call it into your broker. Or maybe some custom spraying. That's a big one because it happens often. And these are little things that you need to bring to people's attention.
How many farmers that when you walk into, and this is a really a calling card of Lakeview Insurance, that you roll up your sleeves, you get on the farm. When you visit, how many farms underestimate their liability risk? Because I mean, the farms have really grown in value. There's farms that are worth tens, 20, 30 million dollars today. How many farmers underestimate their liability risk today?
It's changed. It's evolved in the last 5 years for sure. Um, Liability limits, values of farms. So it's you're always slow to catch up on that stuff. We like to feel that we're a little bit more proactive because we deal with a lot of larger farms. We deal with specialized farms, whether it's dairies or seed growers. So we're dealing more with more business type operations than, your 8 quarter family farm kind of thing with a few cattle. And those are the operations that sometimes don't realize that the evolution of litigation and claims and lawyers, and we bring that to their attention because we deal with all customers of all sizes and we give them all the same attention. It's just that the bigger ones are maybe a little bit more prudent with understanding and accepting the changes of liability. When I first started, to date myself a little, I started in 1994, and we had farm policies with SGI and Wawanesa, and the liability limit was $300,000. So 31 years later, in fact, just yesterday, I came across a farm policy with only 1 million liability. We recommend minimum 2 million, and most of our farm operations, we are pushing 5 million liability.
Yeah. And the obvious ones, you and I talked about this prior to the taping here, was autos. So a lot of people, think about liability when it comes to grain trucks, semis, pickup trucks, the cars, etc. But you brought up something they don't think enough about is the ATVs, the boats, the utility machines that are used out there. Talk a little bit about that, Dave.
Well, I'll start with the auto because that's a big one. You go to a farm, and I was just at a farm last week, uh, nice dairy operation, and they have 8 or 9 vehicles on the farm, and they have chose not to carry liability till they got into a little accident. The hired man got into an accident, and just a fender bender, but an eye opener. And in Saskatchewan, as the example, our liability limit with just the plate is 200,000 liability. Well, if you're driving down the road with your half ton or a service truck or a tandem grain truck for that matter, and you cause an accident, and I don't care if it's with another power unit or another tandem truck, or like we talked about before, a train, 200,000 isn't going to cover you for a lot because you're covering the damage to if you're at fault, you're covering the damage to, let's use a power unit and a B train. You're responsible for the B train, the product inside it. So if they're hauling grain, that's one thing. But what if they're hauling something more expensive and you've caused a loss? You will be sued. There will be subrogation against you. They'll exhaust your $200,000 limit, and then it's over. You will be paying out of your pocket. I see it happen. No one brags about it or talks about it, but it happens. So that's one collision with automobiles. Buy a package policy. Don't worry about the glass portion of it. Just up your liability to a minimum of $2 million. And it's cheap. It's $75 or $90 or what. It's not expensive depending on the unit. There's a good place to spend a little bit of money. And then right down to, you're right, ATVs, boats. If you have a boat that's over 25 horsepower, you need to extend the liability on your boat when you're out. I don't care if you're fishing or if you're cruising around, but if you hit, I don't know if you're familiar with the boat world, but some of these surf boats are $500,000-$600,000. Well, if you hit another boat on the lake, that's worse than an auto accident, and you're responsible for it.
Well, I'm pretty safe. I have a sailboat called the Prairie Oyster, and it's got a 9.9 horsepower Mercury on it. So, man, I think I'm under the radar there. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about something you just touched on. Let's say a farmer gets tapped on the shoulder, going to go help a neighbor with a custom spraying or harvesting job. You touched on that, and so I'm kind of curious as to, like, what the heck? Now I need to insure myself if I'm helping my neighbor out?
Well, and it boils down to if there's revenue being generated. So if you're just going to help a neighbor, all the insurance companies are forgiving that way. But all of a sudden, if you decide, they say, hey, can you come and custom combine a half section for me, which doesn't take long nowadays with the equipment out there, and you don't advise your insurance provider, you're basically not letting them know of the new added exposure. You're on foreign land, even though it's a similar operation, you don't know all the ins and outs. And now you get into a situation, maybe, well, again, I can always give you examples. We had a fella, a neighbor pulled into the back of behind a combine last year. The operator didn't see him. Then he proceeded to back up and back over the vehicle. And again, it doesn't sound like much, but when a truck's $110,000, it's a fairly big claim. No one was hurt, luckily, but those are scenarios that happen. So if you're doing custom work and you get into a situation, they have the ability to deny the claim. A simple phone call to your broker goes a long way.
So if I was going to go and combine my neighbor's half section, and I just texted you, David, you're my broker, David, I'm going to go combine the neighbor's half section, just letting you know. Is that, I texted you, is that good enough? Like
that's all we need. And then what we do is we notify the company and just, we'll ask you how much, what are you estimating the cost or what you're going to receive in compensation. We send it off to the company and they may endorse it. They may say, oh, it's going to be $250. It's not expensive, but you just have to let them know of the added exposure.
Okay, so this is actually really interesting. So I'm going to go combine the neighbor's half section. Dave, it's wheat. I'm going to be there for a day, and I'm going to get paid whatever. I'm going to get paid $6,000. That's the information you need.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, guys. So I hope everybody's listening to this, because this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to do with AGvisor Pro, is we're trying to connect farmers and ranchers with experts and companies like Dave who have expertise. So if you haven't downloaded AGvisor Pro, please download AGvisor Pro on iOS and Android. Connect with Dave. You can just search up Lakeview Insurance and you connect immediately with Dave. You can find him on all the regular channels as well, but we're building AGvisor Pro to connect agriculture. So that's really what we're doing. Dave, when we're talking about those policies with liability at $2 and $5 million, what about how much should the deductible be? Because I mean, today I'm not going to claim a $2,000-$2,500 accident. I'm going to cover that myself out of pocket. What are you telling people?
It varies on the operation and the situation. Obviously, a large operation, if they have we've got large clients, obviously, and we've got small clients, so it's all relative. So we'll typically recommend a $2,500 deductible on homes and maybe $5,000 on bins and outbuildings and similar on machinery. And then we'll look at the situation when a claim arises. And if they're only going to pocket a couple $1,000 and it's a $80,000 premium policy, is it their first claim? There's so many scenarios. We discuss every claim and every situation before they put in a claim. Putting in a couple small claims becomes a bit of a nuisance to the insurance industry. And if you're putting in small claims, they consider it kind of a maintenance. So we recommend,
your rates will go up.
Absolutely. And so if you got for easy math, you got $100,000 premium and you lose the perceived 10 or 15% deductible because your claim's free over 3 years, that's a lot of money. $10,000 a year for 3 years, that's $30,000. So we're going to talk about that and give the scenarios of why you should or shouldn't put in the claims. Obviously, large claims are pretty simple. We put them in. Liability claims, we typically put them in. There's no deductibles on bodily injury because you're dealing with, well, first of all, you put yourself in the shoes. The insurance company takes over. You can't admit guilt. You put yourself in their shoes, especially with liability. They're probably going to follow through with the liability and settle it with the people, just because sometimes it can grow into something bigger.
All right. Well, somebody I know very well was in Langenburg, Saskatchewan. They stopped on the highway there to get something from the hardware store. And unbeknownst to them, they were in Winnebago, and these apparently these two little these ladies from Russell parked right behind the Winnebago. And when this person backed up, he backed the trailer hitch right into the Winnipeg Blue Bomber license plate. And wouldn't you know it, cracked the license, cracked the bumper a little bit. And there's sensors in the bumper. So it turns out that this person had to stroke a check for $2,700 to these ladies. They were the nicest people this person's ever bumped into, but obviously kept it out of insurance's hands. So that's a story that I heard from somebody that I know reasonably well.
Yeah, and pretty good shot to get that bomber license plate. Now, that's coming from a Saskatchewan Rough Rider fan, but you know, and again, your broker should discuss that with you, and just look at the merits of your history and what your policy premium is. There's a lot of things factor into it. So we discuss it with people and just say, here's what I would do. I always put myself in that situation. I'm a retired farmer, so I always put myself in the shoes of the other person. What should you do? Why you should or shouldn't do that, and then coach them through that situation.
So let's wind this up with some practical advice. What steps can farmers take today to reduce the liability on their exposure before something happens?
Well, we always recommend exercise caution. We have little sessions with some of our farms where we talk to the managers at certain sites and locations and make sure they're aware of, you know, safety is number one. We can replace metal. I don't care if a combine burns, as long as no one get hurt. So safety is number one with your employees and family. Then when it comes to safety and operating equipment, you know, we're living in a world right now where you've got great big machines and 45-foot or whatever headers, and you're putting on someone with maybe not a lot of experience, and they don't understand the power of these things and the damage they can do. And one little twitch of your hand can cause a ton of damage and or hurt and possibly death. So that's the first and foremost. And again, all liability situations, because you could be hitting someone else's vehicle or someone else in particular. So those are all scenarios that are real on the farm now. And so communication with your team and safety and little safety chats. You know, a lot of commercial businesses, you know, the grain millers and LDCs, I mean, they have chats. They have chats, daily chats on safety. Those practices need to work their way over to the farming industry, because it's no longer just mom and dad and the son and, you know, doing their job and daughter. It's a lot of, you know, sometimes foreign workers, and it's just a different world now. And so you have to bring things to their attention and discuss it.
Dave, you've had such a legacy in this insurance industry, 91 to today. To wrap this up, can you think of a good example where good coverage really saved a farming operation? Can you think about that? In the course of your history, you must have had some situations where if the farmer didn't have insurance, they'd be done.
Yeah, I have had quite a few actually, and liability situations, and not to get into details, but you know, when you're dealing with death on farms, and unfortunately it happens, um, liability becomes a major issue. And like I say, I recommend a minimum of 5 million, but we're pushing for 10 million now with some of our operations, and just because. So I advise people to contact their broker. The reality is, with liability, the first $1 million is the most expensive premium wise. Once you start adding it up to the 2 or 3 or 5 million or $10 million, it's not a lot more, because the risk of paying out those losses are, you know, diminished greatly, except for those isolated instances of something severe. So look at higher limits, and by all means, people are welcome to phone us and we can give them some advice. Even if they go back to their existing broker, I'm fine with that, but call us and we'll give you the scenarios and why. And at least then they can make a conscious business decision.
Well, Dave, thanks for walking us through that important and very sometimes uncomfortable topic. Liability is one of those risks that can take a farm down overnight. if it's not managed. And thanks for listening and taking a hard look at those farms that you do. We want you guys to download AGvisor Pro. This podcast is brought to you by AGvisor Pro, and the platform allows you to instantly connect with experts to solve your biggest farming challenges. And we're not selling anything. This is about you using AGvisor Pro to connect to Dave. And you just heard him say, you don't need to buy from him to get his advice, and then likely you'll establish a relationship with Lakeview Insurance. Dave, thanks a lot for being on the AGvisor podcast, and we're looking for episode number 3 in a couple months. Have a safe fall, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Rob.